It's East Coast, Third Coast.
Are you kidding?
Well, the problem is...
He said, she said.
Talk about no hope.
Oh, boy.
And agree to disagree about...
It's a difficult argument.
Oh, that's a terrible argument.
absolutely everything.
You see, I don't see that.
A keep it simple, stupid
Well, that
starting
doesn't
point.
seem simple to me.
You're listening to The Pod Couple, where John Immesoete and Barbara Lippert debate all things media culture.
Hello, this is The Pod Couple. I'm John Immesoete.
And I'm Barbara Lippert.
And we're here to talk about stuff that we sometimes agree, sometimes disagree about.
Correct.
Barbara, let's talk about something a little bit closer to our field today, a little bit about advertising media. Let's talk about the advertising awards, I guess I'd call it business.
Mm-hmm. Certainly is a business.
There's a lot of opinions on both sides about this. Is it relevant? Does it matter? Just ask you flat out as a marketing media critic, do you think the advertising awards business is relevant anymore?
I do. I do think it's relevant, and probably Cannes is the one that most people want to win and the most aspired to.
Mm-hmm. The Cannes Lions.
The Cannes Lions, as opposed to the Cannes Film Festival. It's in the south of France with yachts and the richest people in the world and the most beautiful place in the world. And it costs a fortune to enter, a bloody fortune.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's unparalleled in networking and rosé.
Yeah.
And it's changed a lot over the years. There's tons of tech companies there. It's become more like, an Aspen festival, or you can meet all these big celebrities who are giving speeches and music. And
So I've been to it a number of times, obviously.
Yeah.
And actually, one year I asked one of the waiters, what's the big difference between the Cannes Advertising Festival and the Cannes Film Festival? And he paused for a second and he said, the advertising people drink more.
yes,
And
they actually spend more money.
yeah, so there you go. But I would agree with you that is definitely the granddaddy of them all. I've worked in agencies where that was definitely from the get-go a goal to win a lot of Lions, and they'd make a lot of hoopla out of it. It was a big thing to say we're the most awarded agency at the Cannes Network, et cetera, et cetera.
Right. For new business, that's the problem. Clients want award-winning agencies, and so agencies hire the people who win awards. So then the people who win awards are doing these things to win awards so they can get a better salary and they can move to a better agency.
I think devil's advocate, I mean, clients definitely like awards, I would say. But a lot of times maybe some people have accused the agencies of being a bit navel-gazing about saying people love awards, people want awards. I mean, in truth, I think if you really get to the business now, the thing clients want the most is to sell more of their product, whatever it is.
Yes.
And the bottom line drives it. Awards and the bottom line don't always necessarily coincide. So is it enough for an agency to say we're the most award-winning? Because we can talk a little bit about that. Award-winning doesn't necessarily mean work that translated into the marketplace or the success.
There's lots of scam awards that agencies do just to win. There's a lot of corruption. And in fact, this year, DDB, Worldwide Creative Director, Amir Kasai, announced that DDB isn't entering at all. And the problem with these award shows is that it's an arms race. When you drop out, everybody else gets more new business and more new clients because that's how it goes in the industry.
So in his particular case, did he drop out because he doesn't believe in the Festival of Creativity, or he doesn't believe they won the amount of awards that they should? Or what?
They've won a passel of awards in the past. They're one of the most awarded agencies ever. I think it creates news. It's good for him. It gets people, thinking about it. It takes a stand. And on the client side, I mean, it saves millions of dollars. These days, when everything is cut to the bone and people are getting laid off, to spend millions of dollars, at this festival in Europe is a little bit grotesque.
I would agree, but I guess I'm asking, was that his impetus because too much money was wasted? Because I can tell you— Well,
that's what he said was the impetus.
I worked at DDB under the previous Worldwide Creative Director, and I can say at that time awards were so important that we would forego other things at the company to go in the award show. So it was a different mindset then. So I guess that actually turns around to the question. It used to be seen as very, very relevant, very important. then do agencies not see it as important as they used to because of these things we're talking
No,
about?
I think they see it as even more important. They're even more desperate. I think as the work gets really boring and there's less of it and there's fewer ways to do it in an interesting way, people are really desperate to get famous and to do something glamorous and exciting. And the problem with the industry now is that everything is based on this case study that you enter. You have to know how to do the case study. The best case studies sometimes win instead of the work because nothing can be explained. In the old days, you just sent in a TV commercial or a print ad.
Right.
Now you have to explain how the backstory of how the whole campaign was created. And then you have to know which categories to enter. There have been such a proliferation of categories that this year there's like a data creativity lion, and there are like 10 subsets, and you can enter one piece of work in any of them. So, and mobile, you can enter. There are like 14 different mobile awards.
I think that really gets to if there's a problem in the industry or at all, it's that some things are just more difficult to judge or gauge or make a big deal out of compared to a television commercial.
Right.
TV used to be really the place that the most highly paid people in the business would gravitate toward, and you were really sort of making short films or storytelling, and it was a bit of an art that progressed to a certain level.
And there's a lion for film craft, too, because often they're the same directors and the same cinematographers and DPs used in major films.
It is, yeah. And then I guess now, though, so much of the business really isn't that kind of work. It really goes down to a web page or something that is, even if you watch it, you're going to watch it on a mobile phone. And kind of what we see on some of that is like film craft and lighting and stuff at this level. It's just not always a necessary expense if you're going to watch something on a 2x3-inch screen. And you have an audience out there now that their appetite level is a lot different. It's a lot more acceptable to watch something that's filmed on an iPhone or whatever. So it really did sort of throw the business and probably the awards business on its ear.
That's a really good point. I know Jeff Goodby wrote about last year after he got back from Cannes. He was very disappointed. He said it's almost like a plumber's convention where you talk about, wow, did you see that kind of optic aluminum guard that you can make sun for? It's about making these things. But on the other hand, some great stuff comes out of that. Like, DDB did this thing that was unparalleled, which they got this technology from a professor that allows a book page to be treated with stuff that purifies water. So it's called the drinkable book. And you can take it to places where there's no fresh water and pour the rancid water through it, and it purifies it. And that's
cool.
kind of a miracle. The other nice thing that comes out of it, if you go there, is that a lot of agencies don't have the kind of clients who can do award-winning work. So they do a lot of public service.
Right.
And sometimes public service ads, like for, Doctors Without Borders, those kinds of things, win a lot of awards. And it's good to see.
That also,
and it helps people.
It does help people, but I think, again, devil's advocate on what becomes one of the criticisms of it. A lot of the advertising that you see win awards aren't necessarily advertising for what drives business. A lot of things will be for, a public service or something that it's like, well, you'd almost argue it's kind of hard to do a bad ad against some of these things.
Well, the thing that won all over, Reasons to Be Cheerful.
No, it was Dumb Ways to Die.
Dumb Ways to Die. I remember it as Reasons
right.
to Be Cheerful. That's so funny. Dumb Ways to Die.
Right.
Wasn't that kind of public service?
Well, it was, and it was brilliant. It was great. It was for, a problem they were having. People weren't looking both ways at train stations, and people are getting crushed by trains. And a guy wrote a very funny song. It became a great viral. It was all this.
And great animation, wonderful animation.
Yeah, and by the way, we'll come back to it, but the secret of, you're great when you see other people copying it. So a couple years later, I see it used in kind of run-of-the-mill McDonald's ads and stuff.
Exactly.
It's good. But actually on that, an interesting side story, you talked about this categorization.
Right.
And it's kind of where the awards thing becomes a monetized business that maybe this kind of hurts credibility if you want to.
The guys who bought Cannes have made millions and millions of dollars on it in the last 5 years.
And you're going to do that because you have the same thing in categories. I was on that jury. And
Which jury were you on?
Well, it was promotion and activation.
Promo activation, which is a category they just invented in the last, 6-7 years.
everything's in there. It doesn't matter. So
digital,
when
cyber, that's the problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we got to the end, and our Grand Prix discussion became what was going to win our Grand Prix. Dumb Ways to Die, which was largely viral video, or an app that allowed people who were blind to hold their phone in front of them and call a number, and people would tell them what they were seeing. So, it was a lovely case study, and it was a lovely product or point of view, but it wasn't even really comparing apples and oranges to me. It was comparing apples and cheetahs. It was like, what's better? I don't know. I mean,
soulfully, you want to help blind people. On the other hand, this has been picked up all over the world, and people remember it and like it.
And you're right. It became, and that really became the element of the discussion. And it was, heated back and forth. But it kind of became, well, if you have something that millions and millions and millions of people have gravitated toward against something that is largely a piece of technology that is like really well-intentioned, I'm just not even sure we can have that discussion. And ultimately, I guess the lesson on this, we went with Dumb Ways to Die. We felt good as a jury. But then this same thing won in about 17 other categories. And while I was very happy for the creator of it, you were left with a little feeling at the end of like, what are we doing here? Are we victims of another business around our business?
Right, coalescing around the judging so that you'd have a popular choice.
Exactly.
And and then you realize, in the jury room, so much can happen that is completely out of your control and doesn't have to do with talent or greatness or smart strategy.
Exactly. Well, we'll come back to that, to the politics of the jury room, and we'll talk more about this in general.
Great.
We're back with the Pod Couple, and Barbara and I are still talking about the award shows.
Endless.
And I think we still have a little to get off our chest on like what would devil's advocates say about what are some of the problems.
Yeah.
So you talked a little bit about the juries. I've been on the juries, and you've obviously experienced things with them.
Well, if you can believe it, it was more corrupt years ago. I remember Jerry Della Femina told me that he was on a jury where all of the Latin American countries voted as a block. So they'd give a 0 to everything else and a 10 to anything that came from Latin America. That kind of stuff doesn't happen. Mm-hmm. But they're still entering scam awards. Mm-hmm. And, on the other hand, it's so interesting to see what's winning from Thailand or places, where you wouldn't normally see the work.
And I think, actually that brings up a very interesting point about them in general. People talk about the politics or the scams or this or that. One thing we have to remember, too, is everything is done in English, so English-speaking countries just naturally are going to have an edge in this. And you got a lot of people that you have to admire. They're putting together these case studies, they're explaining their work, and I don't even know if a lot of times really great work translates to another language, but
that's a great point when you were talking about Dumb Ways to Die. It was so visual and it was so open and universal, like it could have been made for the UN, and so easy to read that's why I think it won across multiple categories and everyone in Cannes liked it.
And that would maybe get to again, we talked a lot about the negatives. Let's talk about some of the positives, because I actually think, despite anything or any cynicism that is out there, it's still really relevant and it's still really important. I have my reasons. You're nodding your head. That must mean you like the shows too.
I have a lot of people complain because it's changed so much. It's so much work now as opposed to hanging out on a balcony over a pool with rosé. And That's because so many clients have invaded, and 25% of the attendees now are clients. And I have to say that like 15 years ago when Procter& Gamble arrived, with
Right.
a whole flotilla of people, everybody laughed when they sat
Right.
down at the piano because they're like, Procter& Gamble, like, what's going on? But they decided that they were going to make better advertising and more creative advertising, and they were going to put their minds to it.
hmm
And years later, look at the results. Always, look at Pampers. They are making some beautiful ads.
And I think you kind of hit on a key point of why I think it's really great overall. If I'd have instructions for somebody on attending the festival or going there, I would look at it this way. Think less about like what wins or what places, and really just go and enjoy the show and see what's going on, because I look at it, I kind of use the great bell curve analogy out there. And that is like, if you had any science background or anything, just about anything could be measured on a bell curve, from the worst to the very best. Most of the things in it are going to fit in the middle. We're seeing a bell curve of like, if you think of all the advertising, marketing, promotion done in the world, you're looking at the high end of the bell curve. You're looking at the top 10 to 20%. And that's very hard to do now. It'd be very hard for
Yes.
any one person to do it. You can see it, you can look at it, you can learn, and you can judge for yourself. And I think that's what's important about the shows and for the clients.
Yeah, and I think that if you go there with the intention of working and you really get into looking at some of the work that's exhibited from all over the world, it really does change your view. Talking to people from other countries
yeah.
totally changes your view. Plus, they get speakers like Bill Clinton and Mark Zuckerberg, and those things are interesting. They get these musical acts and great
Yeah.
advertising always. They interviewed Patti Smith. They interviewed Yoko Ono. They say stuff that you can't hear elsewhere. And also, it's become very glamorous in that the New York Post has a reporter there full time. And because there are so many famous people being asked to speak and entertain at parties, all of these people who own media companies, this is a little obnoxious, get their names in bold type too.
So, yeah, I mean, I'll digress with you a little bit, maybe disagree. That's the stuff I don't like.
Yeah.
I don't really,
Yeah.
the hoopla around it and stuff, I think is the problem.
Yes.
I think the good part is if you focus on the work, especially as a creative person, even the networking, meeting people, seeing who's doing the great stuff, what you really get out of it is you look at other people's work, you see the way they're persuading people. It can illuminate thoughts in your own head for your own clients. And the clients see this, and I think a lot of times what they look at is like, you know what, Procter & Gamble did such a great job on that. You know what, we should be doing more of that.
Right.
And you're all there
Coca-Cola
together.
just announced that. They
Right.
said, we want to be the client of the year because they said that you can see that it matches sales.
Right.
Like 8 out of the 10 of the best, advertiser of the year have stocks that have risen and are making profits.
Right. And again, just to get back to, I think the reason most people get in the business or what keeps them charged up is really what you'd call the art or the craft of advertising and persuasion. And when you look at things that are great and you see like some stuff that, first of all, usually a creative person will be like, I'm very jealous. I
Yeah,
didn't
it's
do that.
aspirational. You go there to
Yeah.
see what you wished you could have done.
You do, and it gets the mind charged up. We're actually going this year ourselves, our company, we're bringing young people. And what we want to do with it really is like create the spark that lights the fire through the whole company. And
Yeah, I think that's a great thing. And I think it's a real privilege to be there, and people see it that way. So it's an additional perk to, because a lot of days advertising can be very tough.
right.
And, it is something that will motivate people. On the other hand, this could be good and bad, but it's a huge ground for poaching clients.
Like crazy.
Everybody's there to steal your client.
I think, what's interesting too, it's like, I've been in the business now a number of years. And like when you're a young person and you see this stuff, the first thing you want is like, you see the trophy and it's like, I want the trophy. That makes sense. I want one of those. I want to be the guy when you walk in his office, he's got the shelf behind him full of trophies.
Yeah.
So then, I don't know what happens if we get smarter or we get softer. As years go on, it's more about, like I said, I really love to see the craft and everything. The trophies themselves become just sort of dust collector.
Yeah, you were telling me, this is so funny, that you sold some of yours? Like,
Um,
tell me, what was
yeah.
that?
Well, at one point, I was moving houses and I moved frequently. I had just this box of like old dust collector banged up awards.
Old gold lions. Yeah.
Well, or different ones. I actually kept the lions, so that shows that they are important.
Okay.
But I got inspired by American Pickers. I'm watching that show.
Yeah.
I'm like, geez, there's people out there who buy anything.
Right.
So I sold a lot.
On eBay. How much did they go for?
I can honestly say by the time I was done, I ended up with, from selling a number of them, like $7,000.
Are you kidding?
Yeah, that was
They
for a
paid like
number of them.
$1,000?
A few people
So
did,
then do you think
right.
they try and get away with saying that they won it?
Well, I think what happened, this is something else that comes out. There were some people that bought them for personal reasons, and I can imagine they were re-engraved or something. There were people that bought them. There was some guy who had a museum of something or another. And
Oh, wow.
there was one guy.
This is an amazing story, really.
Yeah, there was one guy, I guess I got in the internet flame battle with him because he bought one. Again, I traveled around. This thing had been on 7 moves. It got scratches and it was dusty. I sent it to him and he wrote back. It's like, well, this is scratchy and dusty. And I wrote back, it's like, yeah, it was under my garage. I didn't keep it in a hermetically sealed chamber. For you to
re-engrave.
Right. Anyhow, we got back and forth on this, and it kind of ended up in like, well, thanks for answering the question, who would buy somebody else's award? But anyway.
Wow, so there's a market for old awards. Good to know.
Awards matter, I guess.
Yes.
Even if you didn't win them, even if you didn't do the work, advertising awards matter is the real lesson. But
yes.
At any rate, I think this was a pretty good discussion today. It was good. I think. Well, a little back and forth on what's relevant, what's not. We would both, at the end of the day, say we're pro-award.
Yeah, I think, you have to you can't get too crazy about it. You can't take it too seriously. On the other hand, there is some good stuff.
Good words. As my old mentor, John Greening, said, you always got to remember you're never as good or you're never as bad as they say you are. So that includes when you win the awards. Anyway, good discussion. So as we kind of wrap this up, Barbara, what's the best thing you saw, thought of, witnessed this week?
Well, come to think of it, I'm in Chicago this week talking to you, and at the Art Institute, which is one of my favorite places in the world, they have come up with one of the best ads in the world to promote a Van Gogh exhibition. They actually, that famous painting of his room in Arles, and it's yellow and it has a single bed and a chair. They recreated that room exactly, and they put it on Airbnb so you can rent it. Now, is that the best ad you've ever heard of?
I love it.
That's exactly what people should be doing these days.
I love it. I'd love to see Van Gogh finally getting a little appreciation, especially.
I'd love to sleep in that little bed.
No, next time you're here, we'll talk. So what I think of the best thing of the week, I'm going to go with something I think is really hard to do. I'm going to give a movie recommendation for you.
Okay.
And it's called Bone Tomahawk.
Really?
A movie done by S. Craig Zahler, I think's his name. And I think what's interesting about this is it's effective schmaltz. Is it
on Netflix?
It's on Netflix. It's on the streaming services. And it stars Kurt Russell. It's kind of a weird horror Western. It's the kind of movie that I think Quentin Tarantino wishes he was making, but now he gets too much money and has to make polished versions of it.
Well, what happened to this? When did it come out? That it got sort of lost.
I'm not exactly sure. I mean, it was done for $1.8 million. Again, it's a successful cult movie, but not going to be everyone's cup of tea. But it's a good film worth checking out.
Oh, thanks.
And I think this wraps up another episode of The Pod Couple.
Hey, thank you.
All right, see you next time.
The Pod Couple is media experts John Immesoete and Barbara Lippert, produced by Eon Content Labs and brought to you by Epsilon. We see what others don't. All comments, discussions, materials, and information provided by participants in the Pod Couple are strictly their own opinion and do not constitute any official position or views of Epsilon. Please refer to our terms of use for more information.